Okay, family, before I get back started, here is a list of books from Mr. Alan Wilson and his research partner, 1 through 9, okay? Y'all see number 8, and you see number 7 and number 8, right? Will you see number 6? Will you see number 5, 6, 7, 8? The Holy Kingdom, the King Arthur Conspiracy, Moses and the Hieroglyphs, the Discovery of the Ark of the Covenant, 9, and the Trojan War in 650 BC. Okay. Y'all see the other ones too, right? Okay. Let me go and hit y'all with this real quick. No problems. Right, family? Y'all see who it is? Real British history. Okay. Let's get into it.
Somebody who's been very important in helping to put this program together, Jeannie Ferguson. Jeannie, would you stand? Get a nice hand, please. The two people you are about to see tonight and some of the evidence you are about to see tonight perhaps will be just a bit startling. I know it was to me. Remember over here, I've got Glenda over here who was doing a research paper in my class on the mound builders. And Glenda said to me, oh, by the way, this weekend over at Iva's home, they're having a gathering and they're going to be talking about King Arthur in Kentucky. And I smiled on the inside and outside, and I thought probably, as Jim has said later, maybe Elvis would be there too. At any rate, it was startling kind of news to me. I was certainly aware of the Prince Madoc tradition throughout Indiana and Kentucky, because previous to that, the only thing I ever learned is from students. Previous to that, I had a student who did a research paper on Prince Madoc, so I was familiar with that aspect. The evidence they showed made me do some flip-flops here and there, and I think you're going to get a surprise or two tonight. We're going to start the program out tonight with Jim Michael, who is president of the Ancient Kentucky Historical Association. And Jim has been working on this project a few years, and then following him is going to be our guest from Cardiff, Wales, Alan Wilson. And Alan Wilson, although he doesn't look like he's old enough, has been working on this more than 35 years. So would you give a nice welcome, please, to Jim Michael, and Georgia, would you catch the lights over there?
The Ancient Kentucky Historical Association is a chartered nonprofit organization. We've been in existence about 6 years. And we've been looking at old parts, out-of-place articles that's what the archaeologists call them, things that just don't fit but have never really been researched. And we don't ask you this evening to believe anything that we're about to tell you, but we do ask that you research it for yourself, look at it, look at the information that we've uncovered, and maybe it'll make some sense one of these days. First of all, these are the things that we found as we looked through the last 300 years of literature. There were some armor plating at the Falls of the Ohio that had a harp and a mermaid and some letters on it that looked Latin. There were forts and mounds, 10,000 mounds in the Ohio Valley. There were forts, 20, 30 of them recorded in 1820 up and down the river and around Kentucky. That were stone. Indians said we didn't make these. Then there were at least 20 very well documented stories of Welsh-speaking Indians. Encounters where they spoke for months with these people, and they spoke the British tongue. They really weren't Welsh. They were really British. I tell you, they're really trying to get into this thing. Okay. Then there were stories of Melungeons, a strange group of people living in Hazard, Harlan, Sneedville, Tennessee, that were white, that had a British tongue and said they were Christian. Then the story of the Wallam Olam, which
Could the white British tongue in Christian be white as in purity, like Lebanon, righteousness? That's the white part. British, we know that Zerah, Judah lineage was over there. The Picts is over there, you know. And the Christian, are we talking about? Because in my other videos, they talk about the first generation of Christians, right? Which those are the Nestorian kings, right? Men of old and renowned counsel, right? Men of renowned counsel, right? I think I'm saying that right. But if I'm not, y'all can look up the word Nestorian, right? And you will get the definition. I apologize if I'm not saying it right. Let's get back to the video. So, white, British, Christians, right? So, we talking about righteous, Israelite, Nestorians. All right, let's keep going.
It was a writing on sticks that was picked up by Dr. Ward, who turned it over to Rafinesque, one of our first historians. And he and Eli Lilly of pharmaceutical manufacturer fame published in 1833 the story of the Wallam Olam. And we had mummies in 5 different parts of Kentucky, and they were all wrapped the same way in a cloth wrapper manufactured, they thought, from the bark of trees and then put into deerskin. We've researched those, and we'll show you some of that tonight. Legends, everybody knew about a Prince Madoc. It was on everybody's tongue. And then, of course, there was a strange writing that we found on rocks all around Kentucky. At first, we didn't know there was any in Kentucky. Now we do. This is John Filson's book, and it was published back in 1784. And in the political year, you should ask, what did he know and when did he know it? And he certainly had the Madoc tradition, but he had the wrong family and he had the wrong century. Okay, then there were stories, frequent stories about the Welsh-speaking Indians, and he even lists one here in Kentucky. But he also talks about the Welsh-speaking Indians retaining some of the ceremonies of Christian worship. Interesting. This is the first president of the Filson Club, Reuben Durrett, and he published in 1908. Well, we really weren't interested in the 1900s because we were looking back in the 1700s. But this guy did a fantastic job of organizing everything that we'd already been researching. Beautiful job of it. And here it was all laid out for us, all the traditions of Madoc laid out. All of the Welsh-speaking Indian stories, and this is just one of 3 pages. He talked a little bit about Atlantis and some of the other things in the first 13 pages, and the whole rest of the book is on the Welsh connection. One of the things that he pointed out to us that tells exactly how Madoc got lost is that there was a Richard Hakluyt who published in 1582. And he took work of Guten Owen out of the Abbey. Guten Owen was a Welsh bard, and the bards are the historians that did the recording. And he wrote about the traditions of Madoc. Okay, 2 years later, another fellow named Dr. Powell, okay, took Corotic of Landaffin's work out of an abbey, and he published it 2 years later. Now, he had all the traditions of Madoc, but he knew, Reuben Durrett knew, that Corotic died in 1157. So the scenario of Madoc sailing in 1170 just isn't on. All right.
1157, they say, is where is when he died.
I said, hey, we ought to look for this guy. He said, okay, we'll help you find him. He started looking, and he found Walter Map writing in 1130 about
That's what
Madoc,
they said. But
1100.
watch how the date jumped.
He said, hey, these guys got the wrong Madoc. And sure enough, they did. Now, had Reuben Durrett gone across the river or looked in the Four Ancient Books of Wales, he would have known about this.
That's another
This is
book, The
what
Four
Dirk
Ancient
said.
Books
He
of
said
Wales.
Taliesin was a Welsh bard in the 6th century, and he said the Welsh bards had the traditions of Madoc, and they did. If he'd gone to the book of Taliesin, it says right there, Madoc was a son of Uther. Well, that's a clue. Uther means amazing, wonderful. It's a title. Uther Pendragon, amazing commander-in-chief. So there's 6 of them. The question is, which one was it? Now, in his footnotes, he was this close. He said that the
6
Archbishop
Uther
of Canterbury in the
Pendragons.
history of the world said that King Arthur had knowledge of America and that a prince of Wales found it first. He didn't know Madoc was the prince. But he was right on. He had it, and this is in his footnotes. Here's an interesting thing. We call this soft archaeological evidence because we can't really tag it definitely. But this jug was found in the was found down along Cumberland River. But it's a 3-headed jug base, and it was in the possession in 1820 of a gentleman in Lexington, Kentucky. Nobody knew exactly what it was, but a neat kind of a thing, and certainly not American Indian. Up in Ohio, another 3-headed stone was found. It has a head going this way, a head going this way, and a face of an animal going the other way. 3 different heads. Some interesting looking things on the foreheads. And it translates out in the Colburn alphabet. Colburn alphabet we'll be talking about a little later is, in fact, the alphabet that was used by the Welsh-speaking Indians. There's the translation. Back 200 and 300 BC, there were 3 faces all over Europe. It was a pagan tradition, they called it. It actually came out of the Babylonian area where Alan Wilson's going to tell you that these people came from. They were Chaldeans. But there's the 3-headed jug and there's the 3-headed stone. In the church where Arthur's father is buried, King Myrig, we took this picture of them sharing the eyes of 3 heads. This was ordered, a decree from Rome to destroy all of these 3 heads all through Britain because they were thought to be pagan. And they slipped up and left this one there. Kind of neat. The important thing, however, is that one of those heads has, on the very top of it, if you look up high, it has a broad arrow or an Alwyn sign. It's a sign of God, the E-A, Yah, becomes Jehovah. Anyway, unwritten, silent word for God. Definitely belonged to these people. In Britain, a couple blocks from Alan's house, on one of the bridges, we find this Alwyn sign.
He said, unwritten, silent name of the Creator, right? Of God, right? But the Most High said to us that He will put His name where we are, right? So it wouldn't be silent, wouldn't be mysterious. We would know His name. And He said these heads had Jehovah. We know Jehovah is defiance, okay? Yah is defiance.
We find it in the churches, we find it on the prison jackets, we find it all over everything that is owned by the government, bayonets, you name it. And it's interesting because here it is on what the archaeologists in Kentucky call a chunky stone, a gaming stone. So I sent this over to Alan, his partner Brom, and I said, what do you make of this? And he sends me back 6 more just like it from Troy, where you're going to find these people came from. It isn't a chunky stone or a gaming stone. This is a whirl. They use these to manufacture cloth. Okay? It's like a flywheel, but you notice that it has the Alwyn signs all over it. Well, then as soon as I started looking at that, we started looking at Heinrich Schliemann work, who dug up Troy, and the dates on these go back 500 BC. So here's one down at the bottom here that I've enlarged to show you that they made
I thought they couldn't
with
carbon
dots
date stones.
as well as
So how
with
can you
the
say
term,
these stones go back to
arrow
500
shape.
BC
So
if they
there's the chunking
cannot?
stone that we have in Kentucky.
They cannot carbon date stone. Remember he said earlier, we heard somebody say they cannot carbon date stone. So how can he say the carbon date of these stones go back to 500 BC? That's all I'm asking. Message.
Rather hard evidence because isn't anybody on earth that could have faked this. I'm the first one that ever heard of it, and they found that in 1939. Archaeologists found it. Webb from the University of Kentucky. So, okay, that's how they used the stone you see here to as a whirl to manufacture cloth, and of course the mummies that they found all over Kentucky had a woven cloth that was manufactured somehow. Now we think possibly we know how. Here's a Frenchman that came down out of Manitoba, Canada, and he found the Mandan Indians because he'd heard there were Welsh-speaking Indians, and sure enough, they were Welsh-speaking Indians. But isn't it interesting? They wore a cross, and they spoke the name Jesus and Mary. A little strange for Indians, right? 1735. Now,
1735. Isn't that after colonization? I'm just saying. One needs already over here. One needs people already over here. They had already invaded and subjugated. They had already raptured us. If you don't know what rapture means, look it up. Subdue, take away, rape, kidnap. We was already raptured by these people. But now y'all waiting to be raptured for the ones who still is Christian. And you just happen to stumble on this video. You still waiting to be raptured? I advise you to go on the online etymology and look up the word rapture, and you will see that it means rape, kidnap, steal, take away, subdue. You have been kidnapped from your homeland, America. Our people was kidnapped from here and taken to other nations. Okay? They have stolen our identity. They have stolen our kingdom. They have stolen our lives and our wealth. And they even stole our Creator and hid him from us. But one thing we have to learn is that the blame is not all on them. They only did what the Most High gave them power to do. And they went over some things that they shouldn't have done. But the Most High is going to take care of that. He said he's coming back to recompense. So stop hollering about reparations. Because you're never going to get reparations. Reparations is a theory. Recompense is what you need to be yelling out. Because they have to recompense you for everything that they took and everything that they did. And that's why they are scared. Because we waking up and we see what they have been doing and what they have done. But the first thing we have to realize is that after we calm down from being upset and going through all our emotions, that at the end of the day, like my mother told me when me, her, and my little brother was talking, having a healthy debate, says no matter who you try to put the blame on, she said at the end of the day, we, Hawaii's chosen people, a nation of priests, we did not hold up our end of the bargain. We are the ones who fell short. They only did what the Most High allowed them to do to us. Because that was our chastisement. That was our judgment. She said, but now they have to be accountable for everything they went overboard with. They're going to be accountable for that. We need to put our energy and our focus in separating mentally, spiritually, so we can separate physically. And she was right.
I mentioned William Webb's name. He was a professor and head of the archaeology department at the University of Kentucky. He found these strange things up the river at near where Portsmouth is today. And It's called a Hardin Village site. It's on the Ohio River. This stone here
And we always
is drawn out here. You see, we have a circle with a cross in it.
Cross,
we have a British-looking cross here, and we have the Alwyn sign in dots. And you'll notice that the cross is entirely surrounded by the circle. And that's the way it was back in the 4th, 5th centuries. In fact, these are in the graveyards over there, and you'll see how the cross got away and came out beyond about 700. There's a 4th, 5th, and 700 cross. So we kind of got a peg on when these people came. Here it is in a mound down in Georgia, in a hand, which is also a symbol we don't have time to go into. This is a beautiful thing that was found also by Webb in 1939 at the Hardin Village site. Again, a Celtic cross, if you will. And if you look closely, there is a second ring here that goes all the way around. It's been chipped off. There's also 3 chevrons on all of these chevrons here, and there's an alphabet up here. A little strange for Indians to independently invent something like this on this time. But when we looked at the family crests of all of the kings of Britain, here are all of the 12 tribes. Amazing how this got into the culture of the British people. But you also see that the kings of Glamorgan were in fact chevrons. Neat. Then we find up the river some banner stones, some kind of something. We don't know exactly what they are, but here you've got the 3 chevrons again, some going up, some going down. Here's another piece in the home of the sheriff, chief of police up there. And amazing. But there's an EA, and I told you before, that's their god. It's Ea, came to earth in an egg, half fish, half man. That's what was on. They found armor plating at the falls of the Ohio. They said,
Time out. He said Ea was a god, came from the sky, in the egg, half fish, half something else, right? Kind of sound like, what's this doggone deity name? I want to say, I want to say Semiramis, but that was Nimrod's wife / that was his mother / wife. But just let me get it. I'll let you know. But this same chick they call the Queen of Heaven, okay? This same entity, okay? She's been named Isis, Diana, you know, it's the Statue of Liberty. Here now, this time, the Statue of Liberty. So this God, this quote unquote goddess or whatever she is, this demonic spirit is even over America.
Said there was a harp and a mermaid. It wasn't a mermaid, it was a fish god. And it was the Chaldean god that came out, got into some of the Hebrew stuff. This is also in his collection. That is an A and that is an E. There's other letters on it. We didn't even see it till we photographed it and blew it up. It's in his home up there. Absolutely authentic, because I'm the first one that knew about this alphabet. This is also in the chief's collection.
I look like the Knight Templar's cross.
Table at the British Museum and asked the archaeologist, Dr. Youngs, I said, what does that look like to you? We're finding things like this over in Kentucky. And she looked at that and she said, yeah, I think that's a distributor. So anyway, here's what we find. This is eastern Kentucky, and if you go up the Ohio River, you'll see up here there was writing up here. You saw the crosses and the letters we found here. At Charleston, writing at Brandenburg, then mummies found, and in these 3 locations, those mummies had cloth and deerskin wrappers. Writing found here, and there's other writing all around this area. In Sneedville, there were Melungeons, okay? Sneedville and this whole valley area. And then 26 miles away at Bat Creek, there was some writing, which you'll see in a little bit. This is what a Melungeon looked like in 1820. They were white, They tried to keep them from voting by telling them that they were Indian or that they were black. Couldn't do it. But they did say that they were Christians. Okay, this is a 5-factor blood study done by Tennessee anthropologists in spring of 1990. And you'll notice that the correlation in the blood factors with the Melungeons is Libya, Canary Islands, Portugal, that's the Iberian Peninsula, Italy, Cyprus, Spain. Wales is a close hit, but the American Indians appear to be the complete opposite blood factors. The Melungeons do not appear to be American Indians. Now, Prehistoric Men of Kentucky, written by Colonel Bennett Young, Wilson Club, 1910, he talks about finding in 1776, now that's 3 years before the first log cabin was built in Lexington, finding mummies in a cave, and they were processed by some count. This was not reported by Raffines, but Raffines, our first professor of history at Transylvania College, reported all the other mummies.
Transylvania College.
In Scotland, in the archives of Scotland, is this letter. It goes back to 1815 by a Dr. Mitchell, written to the Earl of Buchan, and he talks about these mummies found at 2 different locations. And sure enough, when we went back, we compared this letter to the actual newspaper articles, and they were absolutely correct all the way. They did have deer skins wrapped around them. They did have a cloth. The skin looked like dried bacon. Up here, one of them had a fine linen shirt on. Amazing. Indians in fine linen shirts. Should have been a dead giveaway. Wasn't. Okay, these are the mummies then that came out of Kentucky. The first short cave, it's about 8 miles out of Mammoth Cave. All those mummies are gone except for Fawn Hoof. Fawn Hoof is in the Smithsonian Institute. We have a request working for a year now for DNA and for carbon dating on her. Scudder's mummy. Oh, here's a dead giveaway. One of the mummies that showed up in the literature, 1835. This was written by Josiah Priest, and it says that the mummy down in Florida had an alphabet on it that looked exactly like the letters that they had seen in the British Isles on metal. If they had followed this clue up, it would have made all of our research redundant, because here's the clue that would have given it all away. And again, cloth manufactured from the bark of trees. This is Scudder's mummy, went to Scudder's Museum and was burned up in P.T. Barnum's circus about 20 years later. It's gone, but Raffines do this, and it would make a good book cover. This is Fawn Hoof's skull. It's in the Smithsonian Institute. We did a craniometric examination because American Indians have 3 plates, 3 sutures, and 3 Inca bones, they call them. And those Inca bones differentiate all those people that came across the Bering Strait, Mongolian bloodline, with the Caucasians. Well, she didn't have those bones, but they said, oh, well, we found a lot of these too, so that doesn't mean anything. We were looking particularly at the teeth, because the teeth would have large pulp chambers. All the Asian people have large pulp chambers. But unfortunately, the front teeth, which would have been shoveled if they had been American Indian, scooped out, if you feel back in there, they were missing. They were on this mummy when she went up there, because we've got the writing, they were intact and in good shape, but those are the first teeth that go that only have 1 root. Anyway, there she is, and we hope to get a carbon dating on her. There's enough tissue. This is a turn-of-the-century photograph of her, named Fawn Hoof because of the little hooves that she had around her neck. Then we sent some of these messages over to Wales, and in hoping that if the Welsh-speaking Indians had an alphabet, that we could identify some of the things that we found in Kentucky that had writing on them. And Alan Wilson did that, and Alan Wilson will now come up and tell us. Well, there's his book, we've got 5 or 6 copies if somebody didn't think of.
Federally mechanized, isn't it? What do I do with this? Is that backwards? That's it. Got right. I don't know. I've got 2 hands. I'm going to start off by going in the wrong direction, but bear with me because it may fail. I started looking at the history of South East Wales about 35 years ago as a hobby. And my reason for starting to look at it was that I didn't believe a damn thing I was told in school. Well, you okay? Thank you. Right, I'll start again. I looked at the history of South East Wales and I started looking at making huge reputations, say, I have disproved this manuscript and I have disproved that manuscript. Of course they have.
Talking about
At the same
manuscripts.
time as this invasion is said to take place, a vast explosion took place in Britain of what they call the Wessex culture. Marvellous metalworking emerged. All the names around the place, sorting things out. Ancient churches going back to the dawn of the Christian era, ancient manors and forts and heaven knows what. And a massive record in different forms, lives of saints, genealogies of saints, the genealogies of the kings, the written history, historical poetry, the triads, everything sort of interlocking. Charters of the land of cathedral, going back to about the year 400, on to about 1100, abbey charters and so on. And the charters are important because the king gives the charter to the church, and all the princes and his family line up and sign as well, and his brother the bishop or his son the bishop and all the leading clergy do the same. So you've got a who's who down the centuries. And everything seems to interlock and to fit together. What seems to have happened is this. The British claim two places of origin. They claim a migration coming in from Syria. And the Syrian migration, obviously, is a very early one. It takes place around 1600 BC. Right? Now, if that is correct, there is a Syrian population moving into Britain at the dawn of the Bronze Age. The reason for moving into Britain is very clear. If you've got tin, you can make bronze. You have bronze weapons, which are infinitely superior to copper weapons. So it seems to be militaristic. At the same time as this invasion is said to take place, a vast explosion took place in Britain of what they call the Wessex culture. Marvellous metalworking emerged everywhere. They find it in ancient tombs and mounds and God knows where. And it has no sort of base, no pedigree. It seems to come out of the blue, out of nowhere. The second migration takes place around 500 BC. And it's said to come from Troy, and the British have always claimed to be Trojans. And this was happily accepted until the beginning of the 19th century. Then people in Oxford had bright ideas, and they said, hang about a minute, Troy is a fiction. It never existed other than in the mind of Homer. And if Troy is a complete fiction, the history of a people who claim to be descended from Troy has also to be a fiction. So you have to get rid of this history and throw it out.
Okay. Let's do something. So we got the Royal House of Britain. Let's look again at the royal lines from Zerah and Pharez, Judah, right? These are twins that was born to Judah and Tamar. Tamar, their mother name means palm tree, okay, or date tree, okay. Now he said that the Britons said that they were descendants from Troy, right? And then he said that theologians started saying in Britain in 1800s that Troy never existed, right? If you look under Zerah Judah, the sacred cord twin, if you want to know what that's about, look at Genesis 38:28 or Genesis 38:26, right? But read the whole Genesis 38 to get a clear understanding, not just 2 verses. Look who descends from him. Trojan kings, okay? Now, I was reading something and it said that when Egypt was in captivity, This guy left Egypt before the Exodus of Israel. Now, if that is true, how was he able to leave? If we all in captivity in this bitch, how do you get to leave? Did you sign treaties? Did you did you make an oath that you'll be in cahoots? Like, what was done if Zerah Judah left Egypt, you know what I'm saying, while we was in captivity? And if they have it wrong and he didn't leave Egypt while we were in captivity, then did he leave Babylon when we were in captivity? And if so, how did this nigga leave? How did he leave? How did he get the right to leave captivity? What was the actions done for him and his people to be able to leave? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much. But y'all see, let me scroll down so y'all can see the rest of the chart. Don't worry about the hijack Jesus or the Virgin Mary. We know that's bullshit. They trying to intertwine. They hijack what ours. So in them grafting this guy in, they also are grafting themselves into every bloodline over here. Okay? But we know Japhet, Lot was the islands, right? The islands, right? Okay, I want y'all to read this. I'm going to turn it sideways so y'all can read it. Excuse me. Queen Elizabeth spent over £1 million. Okay. Now, is this true, or are they just grafting themselves into our royal lineage? But you see, the Franks, ancient British, the Byzantine, the Tudors, the Anglo-Saxons, the Norse, the Normans. Okay, the Wetins, the Shoals, the Irish, the Scottish, the Hungarians, okay, the Scandinavians. Troy is the first one. Okay. I want to try to see that. Now we about to get back to work. Sorry, I have to turn my camera so y'all can get a full view of what I want to try to see.
And an onslaught developed on this history. People ran about making huge reputations, say, I have disproved this manuscript, and I have disproved that manuscript. Of course, they hadn't disproved anything. What they're really inviting us to believe is that for about 1,200 years, several thousand writers, bards, monks, historians, all combined together over 1,200 years, spread over about 30,000 square miles of territory, to produce a vast, interlocking, totally credible forgery, which would fill a library, and does. And they backed this forgery up with skeletons in stone coffins, with inscribed tombstones that are known to be 1,600, even 1,700 in some cases, years old. They backed it up with battlefields, with graves with thousands of dead in, etc. In other words, something has gone wrong. So my colleague and I finally decided we'd look into this properly and in some detail. Now, the way to go about it, we decided, was to see if we could track back on the migration stories. Now, there is in South Wales an ancient alphabet known as the Calvran. Now, generally, it was written on wood. They made a wooden frame, put triangular slats of wood across, and they cut into the slips of wood with a little axe or a knife. So obviously the entire alphabet is a straight stroke alphabet, can't have any curves. Had the advantages that even if your sight was going or you were in the dark, you could read it. It's like a braille. This has been noted. Again, when they threw the general history out and said, all this history is a big forgery, they also decided that the Colburn alphabet was a big forgery. So out of the window went the alphabet, or the theory of the alphabet. The idea developed that it has been invented around the year 1800, which is remarkable really, because there are books of 1580 and earlier, and 1520, exhibiting the Colburn alphabet. And I don't want to bore you too much with that, but I can assure you that the proof is enormous. So what we were doing was something against the trend with academia. The academics were in one direction and we were tending to go in the other. We found that there were Colburn inscribed stones in Wales, they were in England, dug up in London, they were in the north of England, they were in Scotland, all over the place. And so we decided that if they were the Welsh alphabet, and a man named Llewellyn Sion had preserved the cipher to the alphabet in 1560, then we would know which sign was A, B, C, D, E. Therefore, if we had an inscription, all we had to do was look at the sign, place the appropriate letter underneath, and if we went along the inscription, we should come out with a word. And this is what happened. And so we had Welsh words. And for an English person, all you have to do is look up the word in the dictionary, and if you've got an English-Welsh dictionary, which is easy to acquire, and lo and behold, you can read what's on the stone. Some of the first we did, one was of a stone known to have been erected around 950, and it said Higuo Rex. Well, Higuo Rex in all the manuscripts is Higuo Rex, and he's Howell the Good, who died in 948. And his grave mound is about 3 miles from this stone, and his court is about 6 miles on what's left of his court. It's Upper Court Farm and Lower Court Farm. We found another one, had a floral cross on the top, figure of a man below, carrying a sword in one hand, scepter in the other, his inscription below. It said, Godufan the Exile. We looked up the records. Godufan the Exile is there. It says, Godufan was a turbulent, mad and wild king, for which reason he was deposed and exiled, and his brother Fron placed in his stead. And this proved to be the pattern right around Britain. Everywhere we looked, we found a stone, we could read it, and it always had some correct historical credibility. So we were encouraged to think that we now were on something of a winner. We then found that there were even books in the Welsh National Library wholly written in Colburn. Some of them were 6th century poems and so on. So the idea of forgery was rapidly going right out the window. What we then decided to do was to check back on the migration legends. How's this thing? Have I got the right end of this, Jim? Shake it a little. It works if you shake it, does it? Yeah. The migration legend, the second one that we took, started here. And the people journeyed around here, and they actually stopped off in Spain, picked up 3 groups of their countrymen, went out to the UK, okay? We also noted that coming out of here, Troy, about 100 years before this, the Etruscans had moved out of the area, and they'd moved into Italy, and set up the Etruscan Empire. So it seemed to us possible that we'd have an alphabet in Britain, possibly here, probably here, and here. Because if these people moved, it's highly likely that they took the language with them and their alphabet with them. And we also knew that Pliny the Elder had said that the Rhaetians up in Switzerland, around here, were Etruscans who had moved north. So there's a chance there. What we then found was that there were a massive inscriptions here, there were a massive array of inscriptions here, some up here, and quite a few over here. And they all appeared to be in the same alphabet. Now somebody had anticipated this, a man named John Williams of Oxford in 1846 had said, isn't it strange that we find this Colburn Welsh alphabet all over Etruria, the Etruscan Empire, and all over Phrygia in Turkey? Of course, he didn't say it too loudly. He published it because, again, he's swimming against the tide. Everybody's saying this history's terrible, it's all forged, it's no good, don't look at it. And he's looking at it. So we began to try to translate the inscriptions in Etruria. And logically, we started off with bronze.